Welcome to Primetime, bitch. My name is Christal of FredHeads, and I am with FredHeads, the documentary, and the Superghoul.com, and you're listening to Elm Street Radio.
Hey there, Elm Street fans and FredHeads. Deandra here. Welcome to this week's episode of Elm Street Radio. It is International Women's Day, so happy International Women's Day. We are, of course, honoring women everywhere today. Again, last episode, you might recall, we had on Kim Gunzinger and Brittany Heil, as well as myself from the FredHeads, the documentary team. Pretty much a female-led documentary. Now, there are some guys on the team, and they do an awesome job, but there's a lot more women, and it's pretty amazing. Today we have another member of the FredHeads team joining me, Christal Van Etten, who does the social media marketing. She's also an entrepreneur. She has the Superghoul, where she offers her social media knowledge, content knowledge, graphic design skills, and just about everything to anyone to boost their online presence, and she kicks ass at it. This episode was also recorded during Women in Horror Month, but is being released today in honor of International Women's Day. Double woman whammy. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode as we talk about Nightmare, FredHeads, how we found each other, women in horror, and just about anything we can come up with. Enjoy.
Where's your pass?
Screw your pass.
Hey, Nancy! No running in the hallway.
Welcome to Elm Street Radio, Christal.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this.
Now, you've not yet been on the show. I know I've had a couple of people who have been on for this Women in Horror Month kind of series here before who have been on Elm Street Radio. So just kind of give us a little bit of background on yourself as well as how you became a Nightmare on Elm Street fan.
All right. So I guess for starters, I am a freelance social media manager and content creator. And I operate from the Superghoul.com. But as far as horror and Nightmare on Elm Street goes, I have my father to blame and thank. My growing up was overseas, and I didn't really have many opportunities that we have over here with horror conventions and what have you. But I used to be terrified of everything horror, probably up until the age of like eight years old. My dad used to do these things where he'd put on these scare houses for his Marines and such. So they would band together and do haunted houses, and they scared the absolute shit out of me. So my dad takes credit for how much I love horror because he believes he scared it into me. But with Nightmare on Elm Street, though, that really happened because with the limitations of channels and access to movies over in Japan, I just happened upon a friend that got really cool parents that had extra channels, and next thing you know, Hellraiser was playing and Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's just like all of these creepy boogeymen that I just, for some reason, the aesthetic of them terrified me but fascinated me. And that's when I took the initiative to try and find these movies in full. And that's where my love for Nightmare on Elm Street began. And it probably also helps that my dad, I guess, people think he looks like Robert.
Really? Oh my.
Yeah, people think he looks like Robert. It's a combination of Patrick Stewart and Robert.
Oh my gosh. Pixar, it isn't real.
I'll send some. It's fascinating.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. So it's almost like you're Catherine/Maggie, right?
Yeah.
So who is your favorite lady in the A Nightmare on Elm Street universe, now that we mentioned at least one of them so far in this episode?
Well, I'm torn between, I think I'll always have my heart for Nancy just because she was the first for me. She and Kirsty Cotton from Hellraiser were the first women icons in like franchises that really stuck with me. And I think it's because with Dream Warriors, once that came about, I loved the maternal aspect that Nancy took on with everyone in the clinic. So second to her, it would, more than likely be Kristen.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really actually interesting that you mentioned Nancy in part 3, because I know among a lot of the fans and a lot of the Nancy fans, one of the things is after part 1, a lot of people will look at Nancy in part 3 and be like, oh my God, she's just so different. She doesn't seem as feisty in part 3, but I think Nancy matured, and I know that from the back end, just the way that Chuck Russell wanted everything to be portrayed, I guess, by Heather, had her kind of pull back a little bit on Nancy. So that's really interesting. I do know a couple people who actually like Nancy a lot in part 3 because of that aspect. So I think that's really very, very interesting.
Well, I think when it comes to Nancy's character, she was looking at life and death straight on when it came to Freddie. So that'll definitely shape someone's character when it's a life or death situation and survival mode kicks in. I imagine as that time progressed, it took a lot to phase her. And she's a type of person that really puts others before her. So I think there was a level of just comprehension that, she was able to say, okay, look, this is a situation that's returning. I've got to handle it for the sake of the safety of these kids so that they don't have to end up in the same position that I did.
That's a really great way of looking at it. Have you read the original script that Wes Craven had put together for Dream Warriors?
No, I haven't. No.
It is so interesting to see what happens with all the characters in Nancy, because Nancy's so drastically different. I mean, she's kind of there's a lot more shock to it. It's a lot more of a it's a lot darker, and there's some stuff that happens in it that's very different and not quite as innocent with the characters in Dream Warriors. And Nancy does have that spice to her in that version, but there's a lot there. It used to be available on nightmareonelmstreetfilms.com, but as of late the website has admittedly been having some technical difficulties, so it's not available right now. No, it's not. And I'm not entirely sure, because I kind of help with that, and I can't get a hold of the webmaster to find out what the heck is happening. So sorry to everybody out there who probably wants to read it, because right now it's temporarily unavailable.
Well, somebody who's listening actually has a copy somewhere.
Yes, so maybe you could share it with us.
Right? Any spoilers though, Deandra? Anything in particular that really stuck out?
To me was definitely the ending for the original script. I mean, you might be able to see quite a bit of it in the novel version of Dream Warriors that's out there, but there are still some differences between the script. But in it, Nancy knows it's Freddie that's deceiving her, and so they kind of stab each other before going down together. And then at the very end, it's Neil and Kristen down at a dinner table, and Neil kind of wants to get the dinner over because Kristen has dreamed Nancy into the beautiful dream, and she lives on forever and ever. So just like in the comic book. So I really, really like that both of those aspects. One, that Nancy knew it was Freddie, because it's very different. She was younger in the first movie, and she knew he wasn't gone. And yet in the third movie, somehow, despite being older and wiser and more calculated, she did not think twice that it might very well, Freddie might not be gone that easily. And then not just kind of letting Nancy die out, no pun intended, but to let her flame kind of fizzle away within the storyline, instead of addressing the idea that she lives on within the beautiful dream. And even though in the Innovation Publishing comics that's actually canon, according to New Line Cinema, what happens to her that she lives on in the beautiful dream, it would still have been nice to actually have it in the movies, because not everybody has read the comics or even knows of the comics. So For
Well,
those,
you guys utilized that a bit in the film you guys did, right?
yeah, we did. We used those same Innovation Publishing comics. So Nancy's roommates in that, a little bit of what happened to Nancy right after part one and her college years. That and then of course the dream world that all came from into Don't Fall Asleep from the Innovation
And
Publishing
I'll tell you
comics.
what, like I watched that. We were on a road trip when that went live
Really?
online. Yeah,
Wait,
and
you
so
watched it
I
like
was watching it.
when?
Oh, it
2016?
was
I
it
think
was
that's when it
right
came
when
out.
it came out. Yeah, it
Oh
was right when
my
it
God.
came out. I was following your guys' work. I mean, anyone who's listening to this is prior to me joining the FredHeads team. But yeah, everybody, was in the back seat, just asleep, ironically. And I'm just up watching this film, and what's about like 25 minutes or so. And I was so zoned in. You have no idea. And my heart just crumbled at the end because there was
Oh.
like that sense of closure with Nancy. And I honestly wish that same closure was given to Kristen because they are so similar, especially like in the transitioning of their characters, where it's like strong, empowered, and that's consistent throughout. But then, of course, when you're constantly battling this entity, it's like, of course, they're wearing a little bit.
Yeah. And so I'm taking it that Dream Warriors is your favorite.
It is. Sorry, I'm getting over it. It's a favorite of mine, but I have to say, out of all of the films, I'm a huge New Nightmare fan.
Yes. Yes, there's another
Yes,
one.
yes, because I love anything meta. Meta just gets my attention, and the fact that you got to see Robert in his element. I mean, he was pretty much hamming it up the same way that he does at conventions. You go to any of his panels. It's a pleasure just watching that entire thing because I felt really involved with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've referred to before New Nightmare as kind of like the ultimate fan film because people are always
really
wondering
is.
like what would happen if Freddy Krueger came out and was, Heather Langenkamp actually had to battle Freddy Krueger, and you're like, "Oh, that would be so funny if we could see that." And then we actually like see it in the movie, and Heather says that it's nothing like her, but I completely beg to differ.
No,
I think she's
I can
very
totally
much like
see
that.
it. I just see it. If anything were to play out in that form, the way that Heather handled it in Nightmare is how I would see it happening.
She's a boss.
Yeah, she totally is, and I think that Wes took New Nightmare like a love letter to fans of Nancy. Just it had to keep going somehow.
What other characters? Because I've the other day when we talked with Brittany and Kim, we discussed how all of the extra characters in the Nightmare films and how Nightmare is really extremely female driven, and that every single female in the films has some impact on the main character, and every character pretty much stands out. Like Sheila and Debbie, Yvonne, pretty much. I mean, Alice really couldn't have done anything without Yvonne in part 5. And then there's the Dream Warriors, the kids, the way they are, these relationships. I think it adds so much to how relatable the films are to people. So what other characters maybe that are kind of more on the minor side stand out to you as far as the Nightmare on Elm Street films, film characters
I'd
go?
have Nancy's dad on. I think it's because when you're watching the way they interact with each other, it's really hard to have a figure that you look up to so strongly that doesn't have belief in anything you're saying. And I think that really set the tone for the future films, just because like seeing it carry out to New Nightmare, where, I mean, it's meta, and then John Saxon, you know, is assuming his role again. I feel like, I don't know, I always latch on to, like, father-daughter dynamics.
Me too.
I don't know why. But I feel like, you know, I feel like you guys touched on that in your short film as well. Like, the continued relationship with Nancy and her dad.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I actually had a lot of difficulty with that in the beginning between Nancy and her dad. Like, there was something, I was like in this funk of being extremely nervous about the portrayal, because I was like, oh my God, everybody thinks I know Nancy. What if I don't know crap about Nancy? What am I going to do? What would she do? And then I was told, you know, don't just picture yourself playing Nancy, talking to Nancy. Picture like you talking to your dad. Your dad had legitimately just done this to you. And the gentleman who played Nancy's father in Don't Fall Asleep was wearing some of my dad's clothes, because my dad had dressed as Donald Thompson at a convention. And so he had the outfit, and I let the guy borrow the clothes, and so I was like, that's my dad's stuff. Okay. And then I just kind of made the connection. But I mean, yeah, you know, I will admit I'm a daddy's girl, and I am maybe assuming that you are too. So maybe that's why, because I also love Dawn.
Because I just put myself into her shoes, and, you know, calling, hey, Dad, I need you to be here in X amount of minutes. I'm going to get him. And for your dad, who is, like, you know, you and I are, you know, daddy's girls. If your father were to tell you, what are you talking about? Like, you need some sleep, just like kind of shrugging you off all the time. I imagine that heartbreak of that disbelief affected her so much, because there's, you know, everything's coming from 360 degrees. You've got Freddie on, you know, your left, you got your dad on your right, your mom's dead. Like, what is going on? Yeah. How do you go on from that? And I think that's why I love Nancy so much, because she is the prime example of, if you're in hell, keep on walking. Like, if you go to your worst and you feel like you're at your all-time low, it can only go up from there as long as you keep going. I mean, you miss 100% of the chances that you don't take. So the fact that she's persevered, it's inspiring, really.
Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, I mean, a lot of these women in the Nightmare films are really inspiring, and one of the things I really also love about them is I don't think that the characters are really, a lot of the minority characters are not really stereotypical, I guess, because when I see Kincaid, I mean, he might be tough, but he's not, you know, like wearing a gold chain or something like that. And like Sheila, when we had, I don't know if you follow Graveyard Shift Sisters, but they highlight the black. Oh, I'm sorry. You cut out there for a second.
Oh, no. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you follow them?
No, I don't.
They are, I would recommend them. They are Ashley Blackwell. We've had her on the show before. She is like the quintessential black nerd girl, and she is so much like Sheila, and she identifies with Sheila, and she loves Sheila, and I got to unite her and Toy in an interview for Elm Street Radio. I got to see them meet in person. It was pretty darn incredible. And her and I had an amazing discussion on Sheila. Like, Sheila was so groundbreaking because she was not, like, you see nerd girl, maybe you picture a blonde and glasses, but she was like a black nerd girl, super smart, really studying hard, into physics, and like that for the time was something so different. I mean, she wasn't stereotypical. I mean, Sheila was her own being, and I think that was really inspiring. And Yvonne, you know, she survived the horror movie. And I mean, Kincaid survived Nightmare 3. Unfortunately, we lost him early on in Nightmare 4, along with some other beloved characters, including Kristen and Joey. But he survived that first one. But yeah, Yvonne, I mean, she kicked so much butt in part 5.
That's what I love about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, they do such a good job of, bringing in diversity and representation. And I think that this is like a perfect conversation, especially this month, Black History and Women in Horror Month. Just, it's the conversation.
So on that subject, what to you, why is it important to have diversity and to have representation in horror films and films in general?
Give me a moment to think about that.
Go ahead and take your time.
I think it's important for diversity and representation to be executed to the best, like the maximum efficiency in horror films, because there's this stigma with horror films, and this is like the same conversation for women in horror film. There's this stigma against the violence of horror films, but really I think why there is such a stigma is because it makes people uncomfortable with true horrifying like incidents that could carry over to real life. And you can't have that full narrative if you don't include the citizens of the world. Can't have a proper storyline if you're just zoning in on one group or so. This is when you're battling figures like Freddy, it's a collective effort, and it doesn't see any color or gender or sex or anything. And so I think that in order to have a well executed horror film, you need to bring in all of those factors. You need to consider the proper makeup that makes it feel real. I think that's the only way I can really describe my stance on it. But if that made any sense at all, please let me know, because that was...
It did. And I discussed in the episode with Brittany and Kim, I came across an episode, I think, on a Black Nerd Girls website, when it was talking about how they'll say, I think we need more representation, like adequate representation in these films. We need to do better. Then they'll have like person B come in and be like, well, hold on. Have you heard of, they gave an example, Storm in X-Men. And that's like one of the quintessential examples of, hey, no, there's totally diversity. Like coming back at that first person saying we need more of it, and then being like, that we already have it. So they made 2 points that were really interesting. And the first one was that we need to, that, it's condescending to assume that people don't know that there's diversity in films already. And then 2, it was that why is it wrong to ask for more? We should be able to ask for more. That, limited amount is just simply not enough. You can't be like, well, you have 3, that's good, because it's not. And there are so many movies. I mean, one of the things about horror, I feel, is that it is adding on to what you were talking about. To make things realistic, you have to be able to do so by having all these different people, but also telling all their stories, that because everybody has fears, everybody has different experiences, and I feel that horror is very philosophical and it builds on those fears, and so there's so much more to be explored through the eyes of people who are extremely diverse. And I just feel like every time someone says, we need more women in horror, we need more great female characters, they're like, well, you got Ellen Ripley, like there she is, look at that up over here, we've also got this one. And it's just like, but why is it wrong to ask for more?
Crazy. You know why that conversation drives me crazy?
Why is that?
It's because we have our Ripley, but how many years ago was that?
Exactly.
Fresh generation. And, I see the pictures post when you guys go to conventions, and look at all these little FredHeads. They're latching on to franchisees from the past. But what films are they latching onto now that make it more accessible for them to understand the diversity of, of actors and actresses? Yes, we have our Ripley, but that's why the Wonder Woman conversation was really important, because now it was more accessible for kids to have a hero that they could latch onto. Yeah. And so that makes me super excited now that Black Panther is out, and just seeing the response online has been phenomenal. And, I can't speak for, or anything, but I understand how that is such an important and crucial milestone in film for them. You see everyone so excited, and I'm just floored by the response. And now it makes me say, where's our Storm featured movie?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I know they're going to make a Black Widow movie too, apparently. I mean, Marvel is, so it's nice that somebody other than the typical kind of superhero lead is going to be getting more attention. Right. And I do think that that's completely necessary. And some people might be like, well, it doesn't matter. You can have a hero that is like anything. I mean, I know that one of my heroes outside of films is a guy, and I look up to him a heck of a lot. But like Nancy, for example, I owe a lot of who I am today because of this girl next door with really big poofy brown hair. Like, that was me growing up, and I identified so much with the type of person that she was. And that's part of why I think having all these different people is really important, and showcasing them, because you never know who is going to identify with that's going to be inspired, that's going to have their life changed because they saw somebody that was like them and they identified and said, you know what? I might not believe that I have the strength now, but if I can use this tool to say, they're like me, they can do this, I can do this too, then I think that is a wonderful thing to have.
And that's the power of fandom. I love it. Which
brings me to FredHeads.
Yes, perfect segue.
So FredHeads. What is FredHeads to you? Like, what is a FredHead to you, really? Being a FredHead yourself.
Being a FredHead, for me, at least, is basically being a nerd coming out of the closet for me. It's not something that I got to celebrate much growing up because it was looked at so strangely. So being a FredHead, it's opening so many doors, because I am seeing all these people, and it's just to see how strong and how big this community is. I don't feel so alone anymore. Oh gosh, no, Christal. I'm trying not to tear up a little bit. Because I got to celebrate a lot of Star Trek nerd in me, or but those, I feel like, even though there was some misunderstandings growing up about that, I felt like the horror interest. I mean, some of my family still doesn't understand about my horror interest. It's a little isolating sometimes, especially when I was growing up overseas, and that wasn't really shared in that community. So my first convention was in the Pacific Northwest, but it was a smaller convention at the time, and it's grown so much since then, and I'm so happy about that. But once I started following, I think, honestly, Deanna, I started following your work, and then that just sent on a trail to these different pages, and I'm like, holy shit, there are more people out there and I did not even realize how many heads were out there. Even if you hop on, you can find anything for, FredHead gear. Like I was just telling you about, I just got my Freddy Krueger Minnie Mouse ears in the mail. Just the fact that there's even a platform
So cool.
or online for that is fantastic. But, FredHeads I happened upon, was it like early last year or so? I'm not sure. I can't remember. But just seeing the excitement of everybody on this documentary coming out, I just love that this is the time and the opportunity for these stories to be told, because everyone's coming from such a different background, and it makes me wonder, how did they find that love for Nightmare on Elm Street the way, or not the way that I did. There's so much solidarity in this, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Well, I know that everybody on the team is really excited to have you. You're doing such a fantastic job. And for anybody who might not know, Christal is heading up the social media efforts. So she's using her skills to really make FredHeads marketing shine. And I love seeing what she does. And I know that I'm a content creator myself by profession. And so I love learning from her some of the extra tools that are out there as well. So she is super talented. I'm shamelessly plugging her in case anybody, like she said, she's a freelancer. So go check her out, the Superghoul. But I'll give you the opportunity to plug all your stuff at the very end. But I know, and I have been seeing these stories for such a long time, and I know that a lot of people have at these conventions. And I think part of us, when doing FredHeads, one of the things is also that kind of, I used to say it was like traveling through a vortex. I come from this world where I don't know anybody who's a horror fan, like in person. I don't really talk about it too much. I mean, I really didn't talk about it a couple of years ago all that much, because my family didn't really understand. And I kind of felt like Batman in a way, because it was like my secret superpower being this horror fan. But like traveling through this vortex to conventions and then seeing all these people and just living an almost completely different life, being more myself, being with people like me, and then traveling back through a vortex into this foreign land of quote unquote reality, I guess. And
doesn't that make post-con depression so horrible?
It's terrible. I hate it.
I hate
God awful. Need a support group.
It's like you get home, you don't even want to unpack. You're hoping that there's an opportunity that you can just take that same suitcase out the freaking door and start it all over again.
Yep.
Like, please, weekend.
I know. And then it's like 24 hours later, I'm like, 24 hours ago, I was at that convention. A week ago at this time, I was at that convention. And I'm just like, I just want to go back. And then you have to find another one and count down until you can go back again. I mean, yeah, post-con blues is
it just reminds me of Nightmare Before Christmas, when the mayor's like, we have 365 days till next Halloween. 364. That's pretty much how it goes with conventions.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so true. Oh my gosh. And the thing is, though, about like when you were saying that there's all this stuff out there for A Nightmare on Elm Street, it truly, I see so much creativity going out there around a lot of the Nightmare fans, between dolls and dioramas to the different masks and the sweaters and the gloves and the ears. I mean, anybody who's a FredHead, they do so many incredible things, and the costumes that come out from a lot of the fans. I mean, and we discussed this on a previous episode, but now we're seeing, and Robert Englund has even mentioned this, we're seeing more Ricks, we're seeing more Alices, we're seeing more Nancys and Tinas, and more Nightmare characters outside of Freddy. And it's just this huge cultural phenomenon that Nightmare fans are just completely nutty about the franchise. They love it. It's vibrant, it's fun, it's addictive, and it's a wonderful, wonderful fandom to be a part of. And I'm very lucky to be a part of that fandom with so many incredible women.
And actually, I now that we're talking about it, I'm not sure if you've brought it up on your podcast yet, but Paige mentioned that you guys met online because of Nightmare on Elm Street?
We actually met on the Nightmare on Elm Street films.com forums back in February of 2008. So 10 years ago today. Paige is actually the first Nightmare on Elm Street friend I ever made back then.
My gosh,
she was
10 years.
Yes, she was the Paige-alicious on there, and which still continues through a lot of what she does now. I remember, I think she had blonde hair back then, and she might have been a little more tan, and but we just stayed in contact, and we bonded over our love of Nancy, because I went on there, and I think when I originally started, I was young, and I was like, I don't know what name to go by, so I had two. I had Mrs. Freddy Krueger, Lord forgive me, and then I had Nancy Thompson, 1428, and I was like, and then people were like, you're the same person, pretty much in the same day, and I was like, oh, you're right, maybe I should pick a name, and then I just picked Nancy Thompson, 1428, because I loved it so much more, and then, yeah, Paige and I just connected on Facebook, and we stayed in contact, and I didn't get to meet her in person at a convention until 2012 at a Days of the Dead show in Chicago. And she made me a Nancy doll, and I still have it.
Aww.
It was wonderful. Yeah, it was wonderful.
That's what I love about how fandom and the internet, I mean, obviously there's some demons to the internet, of course. Don't read the comments. But you know, I just love how it gives us the platform to connect with like-minded individuals. I mean, look how I connected with you guys. You guys put a call out there, and I'm just like, I'm on it. But just that solidarity, that feeling of, you know, continued friendships, that you don't feel like you're walking on eggshells because of your interests. It's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I look at FredHeads and I see this team. No disrespect to the guys that we have on the team. Absolutely, we love everybody, but it's super female driven, FredHeads. I mean, really, this for a genre, and I believe also a fandom that has a hell of a lot of guys that are out there doing stuff. It's amazing to see what the group of people that I've known in the world of A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then even outside of who's currently also involved in FredHeads, that are our friends. We just know a lot of really amazing women, and to have FredHeads be driven by women is so inspiring, and I hope that one day, or even now, other women will look at that and be like, wow, you know what? These women are doing something so amazing. Because I'm going to be honest, I think I see a lot of films and documentaries that are female driven, but they are mostly indie and low budget, so they're not always in the spotlight. But like FredHeads is in the spotlight because it's in A Nightmare on Elm Street documentary, and it's out there and it's women driven, and I think that is just so bleeping awesome.
Oh, it just makes the project so more special, in my opinion.
It does.
Love you guys.
So much love going around. So much love. But that makes me think of, and I think this is kind of funny too, but, you know, I met everybody involved with FredHeads through A Nightmare on Elm Street, but you and I first met because of Once Upon a Time.
I know, and actually I was going to touch on that because it's funny enough, like, so you cosplay Regina, and obviously she's my favorite character, so that's how I came upon your profile initially. But as you kept posting content, I realized, I was like, oh my god, she's the chameleon of cosplay.
Thanks. But even like,
that's how
but even there's like that connection there, because you and I are both Lana fans, and Lana is a fucking, FredHead.
I mean, you posted that, what was that, the other day you posted artwork?
Yeah.
Was that artwork? Yeah.
Somebody on Instagram had drawn that, and I know that there's that one image that goes around in Lana's in like the sleeve with the glove on it from Spooky Empire.
perfect. I love those photos.
I actually remember when I was over the summer and I watched her episode on Kelly and Michael when she said that her favorite, I thought she was going to say Ursula. And I was like, oh, her favorite villain is Ursula. And then she goes, it's Freddy Krueger. And I was like, what the bleep?
Yeah.
I was like, no way, no. And I think I filmed a Vine of me falling on the floor. And then from there, I watched her post sometimes on her Twitter. See, people would be like, who's your role model? And she'd be like, Freddy Krueger. And I'd be like, oh my God. And then something else happened. And they were like, what's your favorite horror movie? And she was like, A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I was like, oh my God. And then
Lana gets it.
She gets it. And then when Robert was announced for Spooky Empire and she was going to be there in 2014, she was like, Spooky Empire, hook me up. And then I tagged Amanda Wiss and was like, Amanda, look at all this. This actress who's in Once Upon a Time and plays Regina. And she's like, oh my God. And she started like tagging Lana. And then they were going to Spooky Empire. And Amanda and Heather, the day before Spooky Empire, went to Universal Studios with Lana's assistant. And they were at Universal Studios with him. And then the following day, and so like I said, they were like tweeting, like, we're looking forward to meeting Lana and whatever. And then Heather came to talk to like Paige and our friends who were there. We were all up in our hotel room. She's like, yeah, I heard this. Amanda was telling me about this Lana woman who loves the Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'm sitting there dying of laughter. And it's like, it was me. I told Amanda. And Amanda's telling everybody. And then Amanda told me that she went up to Lana's table the following day and was returning something to the manager, but he wasn't there. And Lana was sitting there. And then Lana saw her and was like, oh my God, you're Tina. And then she started bawling her eyes out because of Amanda.
Oh my God.
And she was telling her how much A Nightmare on Elm Street meant to her and got her through some stuff for like, I think she said it was about 13 years or something around there. So it was amazing. And then Lana has that story about how Robert Englund got down on one knee and was like, Your Majesty. And it blew her mind. And let me tell you, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I like to think that because I told Amanda Wiss and Amanda Wiss told everybody else that I had a little piece in making Lana's nightmare experience a little bit more special.
You set the domino. It just all out there. And we can have you to thank for all of those glorious photos that came out about that.
Oh, please. Your applause is too much. Nobody's clapping. I'm just kidding. Oh, man.
No, when was your first time meeting Robert?
It was at Spooky Empire in 2014. That was my very first time meeting him. I had not met him prior to that.
That is the one convention I want to go to so badly.
It was awesome. It was crazy though, because the Once Upon a Time people were there, and I mean, you know, you've been to Once Upon a Time conventions before, right?
I haven't gone to, there's one that happens in Vancouver, but I haven't been able to make it out there just yet. It's a thing that I definitely want to do, especially in light of, you know, the show ending. I mean, I saw it happening from miles away.
Yeah.
But you know, the great thing about that is that they've had a long enough run that they've developed this great, strong fandom. I mean, even in the Evil Regals group, you see it. I don't see it going anywhere. Like, I mean, disappearing at least. It's going to be here for a long time. I think that show gave kind of like the hopeful feelings that everybody wanted in, you know, today's society, if that makes any sense. A little bit of magic here and there.
Yeah. But I remember that convention, it was very weird because I'd been to so many horror conventions before and I was so excited to meet Robert, but then there was Lana there and it was like this merge of two worlds, and the Once fans were there and they were just absolutely, pardon me, but nuts. They were just nuts. And the convention didn't know how to handle them. It was kind of funny. But Yeah, seeing Robert there was I had Lana's photo op, and then I had Robert right after, and I was the first one in line, so I just waited around for about an hour. And when he walked through and he looked at me and he was like, "Come over here, piggy," or whatever, I almost peed my pants and passed out. I did not know what to do. I had no idea how to act. I was like, this is the moment, you guys out there. I don't know what to do with myself. I think I ended up making a face of me screaming. I'm not all that impressed. I should have done something that Nancy would have done. I was dressed as Regina, but who gives an F? Because I was so flabbergasted. I don't think I said a word to him. I think I was like, ah, and then I posed, and then I just walked along.
You know what? I don't think I said anything either.
When did you meet him for the first time? What was when did you meet him?
I think it was either early 2013 or early 2014. There was a convention in Portland, and he was a guest, and I was working a booth at the time, and luckily we had a connection there that was like, oh, we know you're working, so we'll take you, to the line and get your photo op and stuff. And I'm like, oh, thank God. But I showed up with a glove and half of my face done as Freddy makeup. And so when I walked up, it was like I was like the last person, just because catching the tail end of it. And they brought me in, and Robert looks at me and he's like, oh my gosh, we're going to have you stand right here. And then you're going to pose your glove like this. Let's get a good shot of that makeup. It's great. And then I'm like, Robert is posing me.
Oh my God.
He's posing me for this photo. And I think I just remained silent. I'm pretty sure I said thank you, because he was so, complimentary about my makeup and stuff, and it was great. And I just walked out of there like starstruck. But thank goodness at that point I had a few conventions under my belt where I met some other celebrity idols of mine, so I was able to keep more composure this time. So I'm just grateful for that, because my first convention, guess what my first photo op was?
Oh God.
It was Patrick Stewart.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
The first celebrity that I meet is Patrick Stewart. And my dad was with me. We're both dressed in Starfleet uniforms. And Dad walks ahead, and he's got a shiny bald head like Patrick Stewart too. But we walk up, and they're like, okay, go ahead. Like the handlers are like, ushering me forward, and I just froze, and I'm just staring at him, and I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? I kind of scoop my way over towards Patrick for the photo op. And then once we walked out, I just started crying. I'm just like, I swear I will handle this better in the future. And thank God, because, that experience with Robert, just all of these people that I grew up on, it's just insane that these conventions are even a thing. I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around it, just because there are no conventions like this where I grew up. And now to have that access is, oh my gosh, I'm just in awe.
And I'm sure that when you were growing up and watching these movies, you probably never even imagined, or TV shows, that you would meet these people.
No, I mean, the closest I thought I was to, being connected with anybody was when I wrote a fan letter as a kid to Britney Spears and got like a auto response from whoever's writing her letters.
Oh, I never wrote a letter to Britney. I was a big Britney fan though, but yeah, these conventions are nice.
I got a letter in the mail, and it was like printed on super gloss paper. Ooh. You could tell it was not written by her.
Oh boy. I feel like that's why I'm glad that I'm a horror fan, because I feel like I'm glad I'm not a super duper huge fan of anybody who's like very impersonal, because the like Robert, like we were talking about Robert. I mean, you could go up to, I think I went up to him and I said something along the lines of, at Flashback Weekend, I said something along the lines of, hello, Robert. I wanted to show you this documentary. I handed him a flyer for FredHeads. He goes, FredHeads is a very interesting name. I love it. You know, back in the day, I was, I think, traveling around Italy, and then he just went on this anecdote.
I mean, that makes so much sense because, you know, you see his lines. He's very personal and intimate about each connection he makes with his fans.
Yeah.
And I think we learned a little bit about that when, you know, hearing about Mad Monster over the weekend. But that's great, though.
I actually haven't heard about what happened at Mad Monster other than the power went out and there was like a humongous line that I guess they didn't know how to handle.
I think they had to shift scheduling around from, if I'm recalling it correctly, I could be totally wrong, so whoever's listening, don't quote me on this, but I think what happened was there was such a huge turnout for him the first day that not everybody got to be seen, so they had to like usher those you know, the remainder of the people there the next day, and it just kind of shifted schedules around, I think. But it's because, you know, he takes care to his audience. And I love that so much. There are very few celebrities who do that. I think the only, well, not the only, but one of the strong other actors that I can, you know, attest for is Doug Jones. You know,
really?
Yeah, he is such, you know, Doug Jones, Shape of Water, and Abe Sapien. Yeah, he is one of the most wonderful people I've ever met in person. And I like to credit him somewhat for the relationship I'm in right now because I don't know, it's really strange that my boyfriend and I got together because of a horror convention. Aww. And we were both handling gifts to Doug Jones, and I think he like assumed that we were together, and I think that's kind of what got the ball rolling.
Aww. Oh, that's such a nice story. I love it. I love it. Well, Christal, it has been so awesome to have you here on Elm Street Radio. I actually was like, don't worry, I don't think we're going to go an hour, but guess what? We are so close to an hour. I know. See, that's what happens when you just talk about things that you love. Like, time just
disappears. Yeah.
Yep. So, as a woman in horror, what are your words of wisdom, just from FredHeads and what you've gone through in life, and any experiences that you might be able to pass on to somebody else who is interested in doing something in the horror world or making a difference within the world in general?
I think the piece of advice I have to offer when it comes to that is don't let anyone else set boundaries for you. If anything, use that as your motivation, your fuel for fire, and just go forth and be badass to the best of your abilities.
I love that. That is a wonderful note to end on. And then one more thing, go ahead and let everybody know where they might be able to find you online.
You can check out the Superghoul at thesuperghoul.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at thesuperghoul.
Sweet. Well, thank you, Christal, so much for your time. And like I said, everybody, she's involved with FredHeads, and then go and check out the Superghoul. And it has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Do you wanna eat? Do you wanna sleep? Do you wanna drown? Just settle down, settle down, settle down.